Hi there, friends. Today I want to talk about your attitude as the person being interviewed during an interview, since that can be extremely important for determining the outcome of such an interview and your success. It's important that the psychology of such an interview is a quite important factor. It's definitely not that you're just going to be tested on your facts and that people are just comparing numbers and publications. It's also about how you would be as a colleague, what your fit is into the department, for example. So a lot of these more personality type aspects can be quite important in the end in determining who gets the offer. I have definitely been part of searches at all kinds of levels, postdoc, group leader, and faculty position, where the person that looked best on paper was in fact not the person who was being made the offer because of various reasons during the interview. Well, specifically, I want to talk about two things that are not helpful in terms of how you could come across during an interview. One is you could come across as arrogant, and the other extreme, you could come across as desperate. Now, they are unhelpful for completely different reasons. So I think it's pretty obvious why you would not want to come across as arrogant, because that would certainly signal to everybody on the other side that you would probably not be a good member of the team. You would not make a good colleague. And so then all kinds of warning lights would go off there. And on the other side, the reason is completely different. If you come across as desperate, then it's more like a psychological thing, because that department making the hire, they want to get the feeling that they have really won somebody, that they have attracted somebody to this department because the department is excellent and what the department has to offer. And if you come across like you just take anything, it's just a turnoff. So let's first talk about arrogance. So eliminate arrogance and instead go for confidence. And here's how you can do that. Of course, you're probably not naturally arrogant. I mean, there's also arrogant people, and they also get offered jobs for various reasons. But I'm just assuming you are not. You just may come across that way because you are so driven to make a good impression that this is the impression that you could be accidentally creating during the interview. So this is really what I'm talking about here. So one way you can avoid that impression is to always show your willingness to grow and to learn, not just show off what you have already achieved. That is just very simple. If you remember that, rather than rattling off all the things that you have already done, just say, I'm also willing to learn this. Just be curious about what other people in the department, for example, do, and that you are willing to grow, to expand your horizons. Then I think you have eliminated the danger to come across as arrogant. It's also little things like explain how you could contribute to other people's research programs, because that shows that you have an interest in what they do, and not just take the stance of like, oh yeah, this people could help me with that, and that person could I could use the method from this lab in the new department to do this. So basically, the arrows all point towards you, how you could profit from that interaction. That is, of course, also useful to say at some point in terms of illustrating the fit. But make sure that those arrows also go the other way around. Like, what could I contribute to their success and to the success of the group as a whole? Now, the reason going down that arrogance trap is such a problem, of course, is that the interview is inherently about self-promotion. Right? This is almost inevitable that you gotta toot your horn, you gotta say what is great about you. It's just in the delivery. So rather than coming across as arrogant, just deliver these pieces of information with humility. So for example, you could, they've already read your CV, maybe you don't need to say that, but you could say like, oh, we publish 1 or 2 papers in Nature or Science every year. And you could say like, well, this is because we do cutting edge work. Yeah. People will maybe not be so thrilled. That comes across as a bit condescending and arrogant. Or you could also say like, maybe when I'm here, I can help you also get into Nature and Science. That's like a bit patronizing, also will not go well. But if you instead say like, yeah, well, we published these papers, and I am just immensely grateful for the international network that allows me to do work at that level. That sounds much nicer and much more relatable. Or you could say, like, I'm so happy I have such immense talent in my group that allows me to do work at this level. That's nice. It shows that you are thankful and that it's not all about you, right? So I think that that is deflecting or sharing basically the honor of these publications. That's a very, very nice trait to have, and is a very good way to go about this. So, you know, you are still saying the same facts, you're still saying something, and you're promoting yourself basically by saying we have excellent papers, but the way you deliver it and the way you have framed it is much nicer when you come at it from a perspective of what you are thankful for, or that you've just been lucky to work in an area in which so many people are interested in. And when you really think about it, it's always pretty much going to be like that anyway. You know, the reason you have great papers is that you've had great mentors, you've had access to great facilities, to great questions, to a superb group, you had great teams. So I think it is really the reality, and just acknowledging the reality of that is going to make you appear in a so much better light than if you just rattle off the facts and tell everybody how awesome you are, basically. Now, so much about the arrogance bit. It's an immediate turnoff, I think, so you should avoid that at all costs. And I think if you keep that in mind, what I've just said, then I think you can keep that under control and just come across as confident, but not arrogant. Now, the other part is the other aspect of how you come across in terms of personality is desperate. And as I already mentioned, being desperate is bad for you for a completely different reason, because it's just going to be a turnoff for the committee, because they want to win somebody great and not just somebody who would take any job. Of course, it may very well be that you really need this job because there is no viable alternative. Everybody knows that. You don't need to say that. It's going to be obvious from your CV, or people can think that that is the case anyway. So there is no reason to dwell on that and to come across that way. But instead of coming across as desperate, just come across as excited for that position. I think it's absolutely helpful to be excited for a position for the right reasons. Not just for any position. This is just any position will do. It's just be excited about this particular position you are currently applying for. How can you show your enthusiasm? Well, you can always ask questions about the department. You can show that you're curious about what other people work on there. So just show a real interest. Of course, you will have prepared. You will know what other people work on. You show an earnest interest. That's going to come across positively. Another point is, for example, don't tell people if you've been unlucky with other job searches. I mean, this may very well be true, but don't tell people about that. It's just not going to help you. So don't mention your lack of success in other similar situations. Instead, just explain to people how this job really is a good fit for you, how you could collaborate with person X and person Y, how that would help them with A, B, C, and how it could take your program to the next level, how you could profit from certain core facilities or field stations or whatever have you at that particular place. And so that shows you've done your homework, you show an earnest interest, is all good. Unless you're super well established already, don't mention that you just want to move to a certain place because maybe for family reasons or because the climate is great there or this is where you grew up or whatever. Then it will just come across as like, well, we just happen to be in this place, but it's not about us, it's just about the place, right? So I simply wouldn't do that. It's just not a good strategy. Now, you can, of course, later on mention that once you've been made the offer. That's fine. Or if there is serious doubts whether you would want to move there, when specifically asked later on during the interview or during the negotiation stage, that is, of course, perfectly fine and valid and honest to bring up, but I wouldn't make that sort of the major reason why you have applied. That would be a terrible move. Even though, of course, it may very well be true, but I would, during the interview, definitely not emphasize that. I would emphasize the connections you can make in this department and how this would help your research and the research of that team there. Another final point basically is when you're being asked what you would need, like your startup cost for a faculty position, your startup funding you would need, or for a group leader position, or maybe something similar to that for a postdoc position. You know, the desperate version would say, oh yeah, it doesn't matter, I can make do with anything you have, right? So it may be true, and you know, you'd rather take this job and maybe not have a great startup package than having no job, but simply don't say that. It's just not going to be helpful. Instead, what you want to say is, well, you know, what I do is not very resource intensive, but I could really use access to such and such a core facility, or I would need this piece of equipment really to take my research to the next level. Then you have communicated that you're not going to be really difficult in terms of the startup cost, which is really going to be the point. The next point in that process may be more like the negotiation, but it usually actually always comes up during the interview already a bit. So you can signal that you're not going to be super expensive, but you know, still say, you know, I could use this and that in order to work productively here, because people, of course, want you to be successful once you get that job. And you need to tell them what you need for that. Yeah, so basically avoid coming across as desperate, because people can basically just smell that and it's not going to be helpful. Just go at it with as relaxed as you can during a situation like that, and remember the points I just mentioned. Now, interviews are really stressful situations, it's clear, and it's really difficult to juggle all the various things that are going on during an interview and to second guess what you're saying all the time. But I think it's important to check, have I said something just now that could be really coming across as very arrogant? And then I can say like, but I'm really thankful that I could have done that because of this and that, because it's the honest truth. Or, ooh, maybe that sounded a bit too desperate, so maybe I can backpedal from that. So I think it is good to sort of not obsess about it, but to sort of low level check yourself on how you come across. Sometimes you can also just see it from the facial expressions when it's like, oh, maybe that didn't go over well. So, but if you keep that in mind, I think you'll do fine. Usually these are always, as you could tell, they're very small adjustments. They're not like huge things to say. It's just to put yourself in a slightly different light. But the effect can be very big. So don't underestimate how important it is to not come across as arrogant and how to not come across as desperate. So I hope that's going to help you with your next interview. I wish you all the best with that. And with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.